It's been a tragic day in America. At least 11 people are dead and several more, including 4 police officers, are injured after a gunman walked into the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and opened fire. The horrific act taking place during a baby naming ceremony. Officials have confirmed tonight that the victims were apparently targeted for one reason: their faith. Here's what we know about the shooting suspect right now. He is 46-year-old Robert Bowers, a man who apparently had made anti-Semitic comments online, but was not specifically known to law enforcement before today's massacre. He was injured in what investigators believe was a shootout with police, but is in custody and is expected to survive. President Trump has condemned the hate-filled crime as a, quote, wicked act of mass murder. But the president did go on with a planned political rally earlier this evening in Illinois. Here is some of what he said.
Before going any further, I want to address the horrible shooting that took place earlier today. The hearts of all Americans are filled with grief following the monstrous killing of Jewish Americans at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You've all seen it. You've been watching it. It's horrible. The suspect is in custody. The federal authorities are on the scene and leading an aggressive federal investigation. State and local law enforcement has been incredible. This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on humanity. It will require all of us working together to extract the hateful poison of anti-Semitism from our world. This was an anti-Semitic attack at its worst. The scourge of anti-Semitism cannot be ignored, cannot be tolerated, and it cannot be allowed to continue. We can't allow it to continue. It must be confronted and condemned everywhere it rears its very ugly head. We must stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters to defeat anti-Semitism and vanquish the forces of hate. That's what it is. Through the centuries, the Jews have endured terrible persecution, and you know that. We've all read it, we've studied it. They've gone through a lot. And those seeking their destruction, we will seek their destruction. And when you have crimes like this, whether it's this one or another one on another group, we have to bring back the death penalty. They have to pay the ultimate price. They have to pay the ultimate price. They can't do this. They can't do this to our country. We must draw a line in the sand and say very strongly, never again.
And we'll hear live from the president's son, Eric Trump, in a moment. First, though, let's get the latest on the shooting from Fox News reporter Garrett Tenney, live in Pittsburgh.
And Judge, several seasoned law enforcement officials have described this scene as the most horrific they have ever seen. Several dozen people were inside the Tree of Life synagogue this morning for Shabbat services, including some, as you mentioned, that were for a child blessing naming ceremony. It was around 9:45, 9:53, just after those services had begun, when a man walked in with an assault rifle and 3 handguns, and he reportedly yelled, "All Jews must die," before he opened fire. Within a couple of minutes, the gunman had killed 11 people and injured 2 others. As he started to walk out, officers arrived on the scene and engaged him. He shot one of the officers and ran back inside, where he continued an engaging gunfire with SWAT officers as they tried to talk to him. By the end, he had shot 2 more officers, received several gun wounds himself before he surrendered. This evening, Pennsylvania's governor said words cannot express the way his state feels tonight.
My heart breaks for the members of the Jewish community. Today, all of Pennsylvania mourns with you. Anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in our Commonwealth. Any attack on one community of faith in Pennsylvania is an attack against every community of faith in Pennsylvania.
The FBI has identified 46-year-old Robert Bowers as the suspect. They say he is from here in the Pittsburgh area, and there's not a whole lot they know about him at this point. They are trying to gather up more of his background, who he was, what he's been up to, what potentially led him to commit this attack. We do know that he was believed at this point to have been not have been on law enforcement's radar prior to today's shooting. But they are searching several of his residences that he was associated with here, including an apartment. And earlier tonight, some neighbors of that apartment told local reporters that he was quiet, kept to himself, but they said they didn't see any red flags throughout. And that's a common theme we hear in situations like this, Judge. The FBI says that they do plan this to be a full, wide investigation that will be covering every aspect of this man's life. They are digging into his social media presence, and one of the things they are investigating is the possibility that he may have announced his intentions to carry out this shooting on social media. This afternoon, the social media site Gab, which bills itself as a free speech alternative to Twitter, said it verified and then suspended an account that was linked with his name. And on that account, the account had made several anti-Semitic posts, including one just before the shooting this morning, which concluded with, quote, "I'm going in." Now, we're just getting word that the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania has filed charges against that suspect just in the last few minutes. Earlier, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said those federal charges would include hate crime charges and would include the possibility of the death penalty. Judge?
Garrett Tenney, thanks so much. And joining me now on the phone, Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization and the president's son, Eric Trump. He joins me now by phone. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening, Judge. How are you?
Your reaction, Eric, to the horror that happened today in a place of worship in Pittsburgh.
Listen, America mourns, right? I mean, this whack job destroyed lives. He upended a community. He should get the death penalty. I mean, there's no question about it. He should absolutely get the death penalty. There's 11 people who are no longer on this earth because of his actions. And it's horrible. And you know what we do in time like this also need to give a major shout-out to law enforcement because the job they did today was incredible. I mean, just absolutely incredible.
Right, and I'm going to talk about that more with some of my law enforcement guests. But, Eric, as we look at the news of the past week, is it a sign of the times? Yesterday, someone arrested for sending pipe bombs to several people, and then today, this individual shooting up in a place of worship and killing 11 people, 6 more injured. Is this a sign of the rhetoric and the outrage that people are hearing? Is there any correlation between the two?
I don't know. Listen, there might be and there might not be. I mean, at the end of the day, this is obviously a very sick, deranged human, subhuman. He shouldn't even be called a human, but, it's a very, very sick, deranged person. They did this. And, it seems like we've gotten to a point in life and society where everything has to be kind of politicized. Everything has to be, somebody has to point the political finger to absolutely everything. I mean, at the end of this day, this guy is a sick person. He did the most unthinkable thing imaginable. He went to a place of worship, shot it up. Again, there are 11 people who are dead now because of it. And, I think we should actually try and pull politics out of some of these things. I mean, this person doesn't represent the left. He doesn't represent the right. The person was sick, deranged. And again, I truly hope, if found guilty, which he will be, that he gets the death penalty.
All right, and certainly a good point in not viewing everything through the political lenses that people seem to be looking through these days. But let me ask you about your dad. Your dad indicated today that he thought about actually canceling the rally. But he said something interesting. He said, we don't want to let those crazies control, what we do. And it kind of reminds me, Eric, I mean, you were in New York, in New York City on 2001, 9/11, as was I, where we all said, we're not going to let these crazy people stop us from conducting our ordinary everyday affairs. Do you think your dad should have gone through with that rally?
I do, and I thought he said it beautifully. I mean, he said you can't let evil change your life. And I think that's 100% right. I mean, if every single time evil lashed out, it changed everybody's pattern, it changed their lives, it changed society. Society stopped. You'd live in a much different world. And it's always incidents like this, whether it be the 9/11s or tragic shootings like the one we had today, that actually brings America together. And clearly the person is trying to tear apart, our country apart, a community apart. They're trying to do massive evil. And it's amazing how the world works, that, sometimes it actually does the exact opposite. Once you get past the horrible act, it actually brings society together. And, you have an entire country that's mourning for, a small town in Pennsylvania and for a specific synagogue and for a group of people, again, whose lives were upended. And so, this does bring America together in a time where, you can say that, America can often be fractured because of, so many different variables.
I think the sad part, it's always sad, but the selection of a particular group based upon their religion in a place of worship on Shabbat. I mean, it is a particularly heinous act. But let's talk about what's going to happen in the next 8 or 9 days, the midterms. How does America turn from its focus on some of these horrific things that we're seeing daily in the news to focusing on what's important in terms of the country continuing on the course that it's on, and getting people to focus on real politics as opposed to the rhetoric that is making up politics?
Well, and you do hope they focus on the real issues as opposed to rhetoric. This obviously aside, because this is absolutely horrible what happened, and you have other tragedies. I mean, obviously look at the hurricane that hit North Florida, the Panhandle of Florida so hard. But obviously those are unthinkable things. But you do think that people can get past some of the other rhetoric that they see in the media every single day, because Judge, America's winning right now. I mean, we're winning. Our economy's winning. Our military's winning. Our veterans are winning. I mean, just about everything's winning. I mean, we've got the fastest growing GDP and, one of the fastest growing GDPs in the history of the country. We have the lowest unemployment. Manufacturing's coming back to this country. The stock markets are at record highs. 401ks have done tremendously well, and I can go on and on and on. The price for prescription drugs is coming down, something that my father made a big focus on last week. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but, I mean, our country is thriving. We're no longer getting ripped off by China. We're no longer getting ripped off by Mexico. We're the envy of the world right now. I mean, America is the envy of the world, and it's hard to say in a day like today when something so tragic happened. But our economy is doing great. Our country is doing great. We're just rated the #1 economy on Earth, and so you hope a lot of the rhetoric gets put aside, and you hope people focus on all the positive attributes and, the many great things that's happening in our country right now.
But, when you talk about it, Eric, it's almost as though there isn't one metric that hasn't improved under your father, and yet the left is so dug in, so angry. And when you see, the rhetoric of people who are congresswomen, congressmen, you wonder how you can get people to take their sights off of that anger and turn it towards something positive.
Yeah, it's almost amazing. When you're doing the best, it's almost people are the most angry, and it's kind of interesting. And I've seen it personally, where you see a lot of the left lashing out, and they don't have a great message right now. They want to double people's taxes. They want to constantly attack law enforcement. Again, days like today make that just unthinkable. I mean, they're the bravest men and women that we have in the country, but
without a doubt,
the country is doing amazingly well. We're winning. We're winning on every metric, and if you can put aside the rhetoric, and you can actually look at quantifiable, statistics and quantifiable measures, our country is doing the best it's ever done before. And as Americans, hopefully days like today make us rally around that we are Americans, that we all, bleed the same red, white, and blue. I mean, we love this country. We love our nation. We want our nation to be successful, and
our people to be safe.
Everybody should cool it down a little bit.
Yes. All right. Eric Trump, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Judge. Great to be here.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's talk more about the suspect and where this investigation could go. Joining me now is the former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, retired police officer Steve Rogers. All right, Steve. You got to tell me something I don't already know about this guy. I find out that not only is he has an active license to carry a firearm, okay, but in addition to that, he is a Trump hater. He rallied against the Jews. He had this blog. He posted on this blog, HIAS, which stands for Hebrew Immigration Aid Society. He says HIAS likes to bring in invaders that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. I'm going in.
Well, Judge, I'll tell you something you don't know about the police response. First of all, people have asked me all day, how is it that the police were so effective so quickly on this Pennsylvania incident and the one in New York? And the answer is the President of the United States quickly and immediately mobilized federal law enforcement officers, the FBI, the ATF, you name it, the President sent them down. And as a result, they quickly closed the case in New York. And you're going to get all the answers to those questions in PA. And let me add this. Did we not forget that it was the prior administration that took the tactical equipment police needed today to nail that guy in PA? It was President Trump who restored it.
Isn't that interesting? I remember this. Under the Obama administration, they were taking this stuff away, this tactical equipment. All right.
President Trump gave it back.
All right. All right. So we've got that. And obviously that is great. And this was an incredible amount of time in terms of how they got in there and how this coward went back in. And unfortunately, now we've got 4 police officers injured, I believe.
Yes.
All right. So this guy, we know that he had a license to carry a firearm, correct?
Yes.
All right. Do we know anything more about it? It's an active license. How did he get it?
Well, these are the questions that are certainly going to be asked. As you know, it's a long investigation, but they're going to try to find out where the weapons came from, how did he actually get it. They're going to do forensic studies on all of his computer equipment, cell phones, etc. But you know what's going to be important here?
What?
The psychological profile that the criminal psychologists are going to make on this guy after they speak to him.
All right. You and I, both in law enforcement, talk to me like you're talking to the DA at the time, okay? Good. I don't really care what his motive is because the jury, although they may want to know it, you know, the proof is, did he commit the crime or did he not? Is he sane or is he insane? Do we know if the guy had a job? Did he function normally? Do we know anything about that?
Nothing about it right now, Judge, and these are the questions that are going to be answered. But did he do it? Of course he did it, as you said.
So
he
then the only
crime.
justification or the only excuse, not justification, that he can proffer is, I was nuts, I was mentally insane.
Judge, I don't even buy that. You know, we have people running around saying, oh, it's because of rhetoric, it's this and that.
Oh, that's hogwash.
Well, you're darn right it's hogwash. He is responsible for his actions. In regard to all the nonsense about rhetoric, what about the Hollywood movies and violence and all these other things that are around us that promote violence? What about that? Okay, so
That's
he's responsible for his actions, no one else.
And I'm going to add something else. The statement that I just read that he posted today indicates premeditation, clear intent, focus, lucid, clear, I'm going in. This guy is connected to time and space, and he knows exactly where he is.
Bring that before a jury, and a judge says guilty.
Guilty.
There you go.
Well, if the judge is,
Jeanine.
All right, Steve Rogers, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, and our live coverage of this breaking story in Pittsburgh continues. Special 2-hour edition of Justice rolls on in a moment with guests including RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel, Corey Lewandowski, former Washington, D.C. Police Detective Ted Williams, and more. Back in a moment. Officers who responded to the scene. The gunman in custody. Joining me now to talk about the investigation and where we go from here, former Washington, D.C. Police Detective and Defense Attorney Ted Williams. Good evening, Ted. Tell me something I don't know.
Well, Judge, let me tell you something that you do know. I heard you in the last session with Steve Rogers talking about the insanity defense. Let me just make sure we are clear here. This guy, as far as I'm concerned, was not insane whatsoever. When you think about it, he not only says at some stage on his social media site, I'm going in.
I'm going in,
when you look at premeditation, deliberation, all of the things, the prerequisites that are necessary for first degree, they're there. Not only do he go in, he shoots up the place, and guess what? He's sane enough to try to get out of there and run away from the police.
Go
and guess
get
what?
him, Ted.
At
That's
that
right.
stage, he runs back in. And this so-called insane man then goes up to the 3rd floor, and this insane man shoots it out with the police. This man was not insane, and if I was the lawyer prosecuting this case, I would love to have it.
And if you're defending this case, Ted?
If I was defending this case, I would try to talk to people who knew him and to talk about maybe what his motivation was to try to mitigate and everything. But I got to also tell you something else. This guy was not a fan of the president.
That's right.
If you notice, at times there's a segment of society that want to blame everything that happens in America on the president. Well, you can't do that, because if you go to this guy's social media site, you will read in there where he says this: Trump is a globalist, not a nationalist. There is no Make America Great Again. This is coming from Robert Bauer's site, Judge.
Well, you're right, Ted. You're right about that. Everybody assumes he's a right-winger because he ended up killing in a synagogue. There's no question. This guy didn't vote for Donald Trump. He didn't like Donald Trump. And he's not insane. He's focused. He's clear. He's intent on what he's doing, and he's plain evil. And you know what? I agree with the president. There's only one appropriate sentence in a case like this.
Wait a minute, Judge. Don't say it. Let me say it.
You say it.
The death penalty.
You got it.
They need to nail his butt and put him into the electric chair, just as he took 11 lives. Judge, just think about it. You walk into a church, a house of worship, and you take 11 lives. These were very vulnerable, decent people who are not going home to their families tonight.
You know what, Ted? You talk about this is a hate crime. We both know it's a hate crime.
Absolutely.
Hate crimes don't just affect the individual who's been victimized. They have a ripple effect in the community. It is not only the individual who's being taken out in a box to a morgue and then in a box. It's a whole community who suffers from a fear that because they're a part of that community, that they're going to be the next victim. The ripple effect is huge.
The ripple effect goes way out. And as a matter of fact, it goes throughout the country, Judge. As a matter of fact, in New York, where you are, the law enforcement officers there are putting additional protection on synagogues.
As they should.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, and let's talk about it, Ted. I mean, you know, there were so many people who were against additional punishments for hate crimes, but every state in the union now, as I understand it, has hate crime penalties that are more serious because they recognize the seriousness and how expansive these crimes are, how they go beyond the individual victim. But what pains me is that there are still people who focus on hate. This guy hates Jews. A couple of days ago, I believe in Kentucky, one guy goes in and he shoots a couple of African Americans, and when a white guy takes out a gun to shoot him, he says, don't worry about it, I'm not going to shoot you, you're white. I mean, this kind of hate is horrible, and I don't understand, other than they're ignorant, they're arrogant, and they don't deserve to breathe the same air that you and I breathe.
And you just said it, they don't deserve to breathe the same air, and this is one reason why I'm taking my hat off to the Justice Department tonight, that they are looking to prosecute this guy Bowers under the hate crime statute, because under that statute, Judge, on the federal level, it carries the death penalty.
That's right.
So therefore, this guy could very well be looking at being put to death.
Yes, yes. All right. Ted Williams, thanks so much for being with us tonight and for all you've done today. And much more on tonight's breaking news ahead. But next, we're going to talk about the march to the midterms. We're just over a week away. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel joins me live next. A massacre inside a synagogue in Pittsburgh. 11 people killed, at least 6 injured, including several police officers who responded to the scene. The shooter, a hate-filled anti-Semite, identified by police as Robert Bowers, shot and injured, but in police custody. Much more coming up throughout this 2-hour edition of Justice. But first, here to weigh in on tonight's breaking news and more as we head into the final stretch before the midterm elections, RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Good evening, Ronna. Thanks for being with us tonight. Your reaction to some of the events of the past week. Let's start with today and the shooting in the synagogue.
Well, my heart goes out to those families and the whole Jewish community that's been affected by this violent, evil, murderous hate act. And I'm proud of the president and the Justice Department that has said they're going to prosecute under the hate crime statute that will bring the maximum penalty of the death penalty. But all of America is screaming right now for Pittsburgh and this community that has been so tragically impacted by the events of today.
You know, and yesterday, Rana, an individual arrested for sending those, I believe, I don't know how many pipe bombs to several people in office, and those who are literally Trump haters. Do you think that the rhetoric of today is impacting the way people are conducting themselves?
Well, I think there's a common denominator in all of these things, and it's evil. And these people are deranged and evil that are committing these acts. And I don't think, as Eric said earlier, you need to look at their political affiliations or their, their party affiliation. It's about who these individuals are, and they're deranged and they're evil. And the president has taken the lead and said, we need to unite as a country against these hateful acts. And it's a time for civility. And he said last night, I was with him in the rally in North Carolina, he said, let's start focusing on the policies that we're putting forward as a government, and not on ways that we can divide each other. And I think that's the right stance. And I hope Democrats will come to the table. I know that right now, Democrats and Republicans are coming together to mourn what happened in Pittsburgh. This is not a partisan event. This is something that brings Americans together as we grieve for those who are suffering.
Well, you know, that is certainly a hope, because, you know, we are all Americans, and this kind of evil can't divide us. You know, if there is any silver lining, maybe it will bring us together. But, you know, to make a left turn here, midterms 9 days away. How do you get the country to focus on the issues as opposed to, number one, the rhetoric? Or how do you get people to get out of their homes when you and I both know 10 days ago, because of Kavanaugh and all of the other stuff that have been happening and the caravan, you know, people couldn't wait to get to the voting booths. Now, I'm not so sure if things haven't been tamped down with all this violence.
Well, that's where the RNC has put together, why the RNC has put together the largest field program we've had in history. We've had 60 million voter contacts thus far. We've trained 25,000 field organizers across the country. We've raised over $269 million. And all of that is so that we can make that final argument to voters in these closing days as to why we need to choose Republicans, why we need to retain the majority. And it is results versus resistance. We are the party that is delivering more jobs, higher wages, strengthening our military, caring for our law enforcement, holding them up as the heroes that they are, taking on the opioid crisis, taking on the pharmaceuticals. And the Democrats have continued to double down on two things: resist and obstruct. So the party is out there talking to voters. We are urging everybody to make sure you talk to your family, your friends. The only way we keep this comeback alive for this country is if you vote.
Okay. And, you know, what is the most important message you think that you can give to people? And, you know, Eric Trump was on earlier and he talked about how every metric seemed to be improved under his dad's leadership. But what is the message that you hope is going to move people out? And who do you think is more motivated now? I mean, you know, it depends on the minute at this point. Who's more motivated, the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, Democrats have been motivated. Opposition is motivating, and they're so mad that they didn't get the White House in 2016, so they've been energized. But Republicans are motivated, too, and the party has seen that. We have seen a rise in our energy, and with the field program we've put together, and then putting President Trump out on the campaign trail and putting him in all these states. I mean, what he did last night in North Carolina, I was with him. He's going to be making that last-minute push, and he's going to say to voters, are you better off than you were 2 years ago? Is our country safer? Is our country stronger? Are we making America great again? And on every metric, voters are going to say yes. And Democrats are offering nothing except obstruct, resist, raising taxes, abolish ICE, open borders. It is a very clear contrast between the messages that are being delivered to voters. And Republicans, along with President Trump, are making that final push to make sure voters get out and vote, because majorities are at stake and our country's trajectory, which is on the rise, is at stake. So go to vote.gop.com, get engaged. This is not an election where you want to wake up the day after and say, I could have done more.
Now, you said that last night you were with the president in North Carolina. Okay.
I was.
All right. So for 9 days, is he out on the road again? It's not even on the road. It's in the air.
He is going to be on the road at an unprecedented pace. Listen, if we keep these majorities in the Senate and the House, and it looks like we're going to expand our majority in the Senate, which is unprecedented in a midterm year of a first president, it will be because of President Trump. He has driven small dollar fundraising for our party, and he has ignited our base by getting out and doing these rallies in important state after important state where his presence shows, we've seen it in the metrics, increases the energy and increases the voter turnout. So he is going to be out there. I don't know how he does it, Jeanine. I'm exhausted already. I don't know how he does it, but he cares so much about our country, and he knows what's at stake, and he's going to do everything we can to keep these majorities.
All right. Ronna McDaniel, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
All right. And more on the breaking news out of Pittsburgh. We'll take you to a vigil for the victims next.
Selling steroids, even making a bomb threat. Two key clues helped end the 4-day nationwide manhunt. One, Sayak had his fingerprint on one of the envelopes used to house the bombs. And two, DNA was found on at least 2 of those explosive devices. Charles, back to you.
Steve, thank you very much. The question now, what are investigators looking for? Former FBI Special Agent Terry Turchi, he directed the task force that captured the Unabomber, and he joins us now. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Charles.
Bring us up to speed where you think investigators are right now.
Well, they're just about everywhere that Caesar's been in the last few months. They're at his, they have his car already, and they're looking at that. They're trying to identify and talk to everybody he ever knew. And they're trying to put together, as Christopher Ray just said to us, a picture of the possibility of other bombs in the mail that he might have dropped off before they arrested him. And what they're going to learn as they put a timeline together that will go back many months is other information about his motivation. And even though there's all kinds of talk about and all kinds of theories about why he did what he did, the bottom line is we're probably dealing here, as we have in the past with these kind of people, with an individual who's really conflicted mentally. And I think as you learn more about him, he's going to look an awful lot like other people that we've dealt with before. And I think back as well to the congressional shooting at the congressional baseball game involving James Hodgkinson. If you were to put those two people side by side and look at them, while one might be a left-wing extremist, the other might be the other direction, what you're going to find personality-wise are the same people, just like we've found before over the years.
Yeah, there's no doubt so far, at least from what the public is seeing and what's emerging from different articles, maybe some sort of a narcissistic personality there, a sociopath, obviously a loner, a loser for sure. This psychological profile that they're compiling and that we all are on the sidelines as amateur sleuths, I guess now, how important is that toward eventually, solving or being able to wrap this up? And is there still a chance there could be accomplices?
Well, there's always a chance, and if they find, and I think there's a real sigh of relief that perhaps he's been making these packages in his van, they find the location where the packages are being made, where the bombs are being made, that's kind of a sigh of relief, because that kind of helps you eliminate the possibility that there might be other people, another bomb maker, and that everything is kind of under his hands. But that's what, again, why they're being so vigilant and so reluctant to say this may all be over, because he could have gotten packages mailed off before the arrest. But going back to the psychological part, it actually becomes even more important later as we try to deal with how we can prevent other acts like this, and what kind of messages we can give to the public on what to look for with their loved ones. You know, we've said a lot since 9/11, even since the days of Unabomber, pay attention and be alert, and if you see something, say something. But to those of us close to people that may be triggered or snap at say, a political type passionate feeling, pay attention to the people around you and the people you love as well. And, you know, I think you need to pick up on what might be driving somebody to do something you never thought they could do. And the signs are always there, and he shows them. And so many of these other serial bombers have shown them as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt it's tougher sometimes when it's a co-worker, perhaps, and even harder when it's a family member. But then if it evolves into something like this, everyone feels like they should have done something. I will say one thing to that note, though, Terry. We look at this guy's rap sheet. It's about 2.5 decades long. It includes felonies. It includes a myriad of things that we would think maybe he should have been behind bars in the first place. And I think that's another reason people are reluctant to say something, because ultimately, if you say something and these guys are free to walk the streets, you become a target.
People do worry about that. I've had people look me right in the eye and say, well, why should I have said anything? Because this person had already been in trouble and no one ever kept him in jail. And it's hard to have a response to that. That's our criminal justice system, and you and I probably don't have a lot of time to talk about that. We could take a lot longer than what we have. Yeah,
Terry, well, I appreciate your expertise all week long. So does the audience. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles.
Now, before we hear about the mail bombing suspect, he threatened, before we even heard about this guy, he threatened my next guest on Twitter, Democrat strategist Rochelle Ritchie, and she joins me now. So walk us through this, Rochelle.
You know, we live in a society now, Charles, where we're constantly reminded, especially living here in New York, where we are told if you see something, say something. And I saw something and I said something and nothing happened. And it seems that that motto does not apply when it comes to social media websites. So basically, I had posted a picture of myself right before going onto a show here on Fox News. And 9 days later, I received a tweet that you have now up on the screen, in which this man basically insinuated that my body was going to end up being found in the swamp of the Everglades to hug my loved ones. And I'm not really sure what triggered him, but I know that on that day I had made some comments about Kanye West and his visit to the Oval Office. And so I reported it to Twitter immediately. And the response that I got back within 7 minutes after reporting it, 7 minutes, they told me that they did not find the language to be abusive. Abusive behavior. Right. And so
a threat of taking you out on a boat into the Everglades and having your body vanish, that wasn't a threat.
No, that wasn't a threat to them. And so I wonder what is. And so my question is, does the bomb have to go off? Does my body or the body of other people who have been threatened, other pundits that come on television and give their political views or opinions, do their bodies have to be found in the bottom of a swamp in order for these threats to be taken seriously?
Rochelle, you're becoming more and more public. I've seen you more and more on television. You even appearing on my show. And sometimes abuse comes with that. Social media abuse comes with that. Why did this one stand out to you? Was it the worst you'd ever gotten? I mean, did you actually have you must have felt some personal fear or anxiety over it?
The anxiety was because I thought of my family more than I thought of myself. And, you know, coming on to Fox News, I always say this, that I've always been treated very graciously by everyone here at Fox News, regardless of my more left-leaning views on things. And so I don't look at this as an issue of my appearances on Fox News. I really look at this more of an issue as the divisive rhetoric that we see coming from the White House. But I have gotten threats. I have been called racial slurs. I'm sure you have as well.
You don't blame the White House on Caesar Sayoc, do you?
I blame the president for not being able to take responsibility for his divisive rhetoric. And look, the president is not going to come out and say, I apologize, I get that. But what he can do is simply just change his tone. That's it. He doesn't have to necessarily take ownership of it. But what he can do is behind the scenes say, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach because I don't want to see people become harmed as a result of what may be fueling this fire.
But the bottom line, though, is you have gotten a lot of pushback on Twitter, and for some reason this was such a threat. And obviously it's scary stuff to read, but you took it seriously and Twitter did not take it seriously.
They did not. And here's the thing. I've been called the N-word. I've been called the B-word. You know, I let it roll off my back. That does not bother me. However, when I hear someone threaten my life, that is that's a different sort of threat to me. And so that's why I reported it. And I have since reported this, since he's been arrested,
Right.
to authorities.
Rochelle Ritchie, thank you very much. In
Thanks,
fact,
Charles.
Twitter safety, Twitter safety finally did respond. They tweeted, quote, "We made a mistake when Rochelle Ritchie first alerted us to the threat made against her. The tweet clearly violated our rules and should have been removed. We are deeply sorry for that error." Well, the political blame game mounting and the midterms are coming. Is it working?
To score political points against me and the Republican Party.
I'm hoping you think it's wrong to hear people spend years, months, vilifying people, questioning their patriotism, calling them enemies of the people. And then suddenly you're concerned about civility. Please.
The political blame game heating up as Americans prepare to get out the vote. And then the question is, how will this play out? Back with us, Rochelle Ritchie, along with Manhattan Republican Party Chair and CEO Andrea Katsamatidis, along with Trump Campaign Advisory Board member Madison Jessiano. Madison, how's this going to impact the vote?
You know, ultimately, I don't think it's going to, Charles. I mean, people recognize this as being a separate issue. I do understand what people are talking about when it comes to civility. I think we all need to hold ourselves to a higher standard and those around us to a higher standard when it comes to political divisiveness in this country. We need to be avoiding that. We need to be able to have these conversations with people, because I think you can learn a lot more from people across the aisle than people give credit right now. People don't want to talk to anybody that disagrees with them, and I don't think that's a healthy way to live. But